let's go back to, so authenticity requires vulnerability, requires you to let the mask down, right?
And it requires you to understand what are some of the challenges. So you touched on one about social conditioning. You also have to think about things like gender, right? Like when men and women communicate differently. That's just the fact of it. It's not good or bad. It's just the fact of it. And in fact, what I would say is in general, and this is a generalization, that women are more thoughtful when they communicate. They're more interested in probing and understanding context and what's behind something. And men are sometimes in non-workplace situations, which is they want to drive to action. So what's the problem? So, if you're in a town hall in your organization, large or small, and someone puts up their hand and asks a question, if it's a male on stage, they're usually going to try to, give you an answer and probably try to problem solve something, give you a tactic. Whereas the female leader will be like, tell me more. Why do you feel that way? Or where did you learn that? Or how did you hear this? They're more interested in, so, you do have to be cognizant of gender when authenticity happens. And the other is cultural.
Yeah, I was going to go, culture is probably huge.
It's huge, and I've had the good fortune of working in a few global organizations and working with colleagues in India and other parts of the world. And again, cultures are very different. Even our neighbors in the US, close by, we have very different styles. They're much more direct, less, Canadian and friendly and warm and all that. They're just cut to the chase. Tell me what it is.
So let's go on to what's next. Transparency after authenticity?
Transparency.
Okay. Famous question. What is transparency?
Yeah. Transparency is being honest. It's being truthful. What's interesting is last year, the nomination to be the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, she, upon her nomination, said this, and I don't have the quote exactly, but something like, when I'm the president, don't over-interpret what I tell you. Don't overanalyze it and don't overthink it. Just accept what I tell you. Just accept it at face value. The fact that a year ago, somebody in that kind of prominent role has to say that tells you that we have a transparency issue. Yes, we've got a trust issue on many different levels in society. We see it now through the pandemic with vaccines. People are not trusting. Right. But the notion of transparency is people struggle with it. Yeah. They struggle with it a lot. And they struggle with it for all kinds of reasons.
So what do you think are some of those reasons?
Well, in the workplace or in an organizational environment, here's what I've seen. They struggle with it because of a few reasons. One, a time crunch. They feel like they don't have the time to get into everything, so they just kind of give you a little bit, and that little bit isn't the whole story. So they're not being fully transparent. The challenge with that is that employees crave context. They're trying to make sense of stuff. They're counting on their leaders.
Human beings do.
Human beings. We're all trying to navigate this crazy world. And so we need context. And what happens, obviously, when decisions are made and choices are made, employees are often not part of that discussion. All they hear is the outcome, but they didn't hear about the debate, the arguments, the other sides of things. So that's one with transparency. The other challenge with transparency is the feeling that certain things are confidential, that they can't share certain information. And that actually is about more organization not trusting their employees. Right. So I was a consultant for many years, and I worked with organizations that didn't share any financials at all with their company. Yep. Well, if you're a leader of a country and you don't understand how you're performing relative to everything else, how are you supposed to do more of something, less of something, or something different? Yeah. Right?
What you're describing, just to jump in a little bit of, is something that's called emotional containment, right? And, the joke we make about change management is, change manages you, you don't manage it. And the people that have been sitting behind the scenes discussing the change and, planning for it and making the decisions and going back and forth, the only difference between them and everyone else is they just had a longer time or more time with the information.
That's right.
Right? And we know the human brain works like this. Emotional containment is provided by information. So I use this analogy all the time. You're on a plane and the pilot comes on and says, by the way, we're about to hit turbulence. Right? What do? You don't blink an eye. You don't even think about it. Now you see the flight attendants scrambling to put the bar card away, the plane shaking up and down, they're strapping into a 5-point harness, and you're just watching a movie or reading your book or you're still on your laptop. Now what's the one thing that happened was the pilot got on and said, by the way, this is going to happen. And everyone went, okay, I trust the fact that we're not going to crash. I trust the fact that this is normal. But if the pilot didn't do that, if all of a sudden they just turbulence hit and there was no announcement, people would panic.
Right.
They would absolutely panic. So I heard you say a lot around transparency, which is the importance of communicating early, making sure that you're providing, you use the word context, but just providing that brain, that survival brain information.
Right. And trusting that your employees are adults. I can tell you with absolute certainty, Greg, everywhere I've gone, on every survey of hundreds of thousands of employees, transparency has come up all the time as something that's a positive for that particular organization or a negative. People just want the truth. They can handle it. And what we often think is we're protecting them. They can't handle it. It's going to be too traumatic. I worked at an organization, to use your point about change, which is a great example. And this organization was going to go through a transformation, and in about a year and a half's time, almost 2 years, they were going to have to make a major headcount reduction. Mm-hmm. What do you think they did about that? Mm-hmm. We actually started talking about it about a year and a half out.
Right.
And we said, we don't have all the answers today. We don't know how many people. We don't know which people. We're going to try to redeploy people. Here are the good things we're doing through the change, but we want to tell you. And we kept talking about it. And guess what happened? Low single digits, if anybody, I'm not even sure anybody, but low single digits chose to leave on their own accord over that 2-year period. And every single person to a T on their exit interview said the following: thank you so much for being transparent from the beginning. It gave me a lot of time, a year and a half, 2 years in some cases, to think about if I did leave here, what would I want to do next in my life, in my career? Right. They appreciated it.
You talk about choice. People had choice.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And the other thing, I'll just say, and I'd love to get your view on this, is there's a math to transparency. Mm-hmm. If you think about the transparency math, if you are not transparent, if you don't tell people the truth, what do you think happens? Well, I'll tell you. What happens is people start to get distracted. They know you're not giving them the truth. They start talking. Do you think when they start talking, are they going to be more productive or less productive?
Yeah,
are they going to be more focused or less focused? Is the water cooler talk going to increase or is it going to decrease? And then how much time are you then spending on addressing all these rumors than if you were just transparent up front and said, here's the deal with X?
Right.
It doesn't add up. You see it in corporations. Mm-hmm. High profile apologies that were only half apologies because they weren't transparent.
Right.
And so in the book, I talk about crises that were not managed well, from my opinion, from a communication standpoint.
So give me an example of that one.
Well, think about Facebook.
Okay.
I think lots of great things about Facebook. I think when the Cambridge Analytica scandal happened, they were late coming out with an apology. Yep. And it wasn't transparent enough. Mm-hmm. And the reason we know that is because there ended up being the Senate hearing, there ended up being an investigation. Yep. And we saw, I think, $23 billion wiped away in a single day from their value, all in that period of time. Mm-hmm. And we've seen it with other organizations. Yeah. And
we could also argue that the interview, like Zuckerberg, was evasive. Right, wasn't direct in some of the answers, wasn't as clear, and I watched a lot of it, and there's videos out now that you see like they've just cut them together, which it looks like a skit of just avoiding and deflecting and being evasive. So
well, look, and crises are a difficult time to maintain transparent communication. I've been involved in managing crises, so I get the challenge, but the challenge shouldn't still preclude us from rising above it and getting out in front.
It's hard. I understand the world of crises and stuff, and even when my experience has been when a company's gone through financial crisis, and you've got the bank at the door, and you've got loans being called in, and you've got huge AP and stuff. And these are a couple of clients we've worked with, but the one key thing that navigated the financial crisis was early communication to everyone.
Right.
And that communication was sometimes like, hi, I'm saying, that we can't pay you. Right. But as long as we started there from the beginning and they said, okay, well, what's next? Well, I'm doing this for the week or the month, or we're looking to take this thing. Let's follow up on this. And then to that day, and you follow, and you just walk the process.
Right.
Vendors work with you because they trust that you're going to get paid.
Because you're giving them the straight goods.
Right.
And it's interesting you say that because there's an example I use in the book that was from this year, just a few months ago. And it's a company called Gravity Payments.
Okay.
And the CEO is Dan Price. And what I loved about this, and this is in the section on transparency, is that like many organizations, Gravity Payments was struggling financially, and he either could close up shop or go bankrupt.
Right. And
instead, what he did was he had meetings with every single employee. I think there was 40 or 50 people in the company privately, and asked them what they would be willing to do and able to do around their salary for a short period of time to keep the company afloat.
Right.
Can you imagine how powerful that is?
Yep.
And so the company is afloat. Nobody lost their job. He didn't declare bankruptcy because he was transparent. And the reason I think people also hold back is because they don't have all the answers. And that's why I love your example, right? You don't have to have all the answers. You can say, this is what I know today.
Right. This is what I'm thinking of. This is
is
the
what I'm
decision we're going to
thinking.
make today. Right.
Exactly. And that's what he did. And so one of the benefits of transparency is that diversity of thought. He actually went out and engaged the employees in a very transparent way, saying, here's the challenge we're facing. Can you help me? And they came up with ideas. Now, can you imagine if all companies adopted that kind of?
It's hard, man. I just went through it, I maybe not did perfectly, but one thing that I do remember consistently was having that conversation with each and every, with everyone about the bank account.
Right.
Here's how much money's coming in. Here's how long we can last. Here's worst case scenario. Here's what we have to do. And everyone rallied around and stuff. We're still sort of coming out of it.
And how much do you think they appreciated it?
I hope you guys did, right? I'm
certain they did.
And to that point, I mean, I'm just sort of acknowledging the fact that it is difficult because I think what we need as human beings is we need community. We need to be accepted. There's pressure as leaders as much as, we need our teams or we need action from our teams or tasks. We need their trust.
Exactly.
We need their belief. And sometimes in our own inability to be vulnerable, that fucks up. And that's what it's about. That's what you're talking about. I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.